Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Poetry Thursday. I've got a wonderful poem to read to you today. I went back to the Oxford Book of English Verse. This is the Helen Gardner edition of this venerable anthology. It's not the Quiller Couch edition that came before it that was very popular, very disseminated in schools. Many school children forced to learn the bits and pieces from the Quiller Couch edition. Also immortalized by John Mortimer as one of the poems that his battered Old Bailey hack Rumpole has at his mental fingertips. But Helen Gardner, in my opinion, improved the Quiller Couch edition enormously. Details are gone into in the introduction to this volume, but I love it anyway. I had a naked hardcover of this, didn't have a dust jacket forever and ever, and I just thought, sooner or later the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later I will find this book with the dust jacket at the Brattle, and I did. I went back to this. It is one of the greatest poetry anthologies of all time, so it's always worth going back to. And I found a poem that used to be very famous. It's in here, but I don't think it's reprinted that much anymore. It's by Thomas Jordan, and it's his Coronamus poem. That here in this anthology doesn't even give the Latin tagline that used to work as its title. Instead, it's called The Epicure, sung by one in the habit of a town gallant. And that is meant literally. This was often sung to ditties of music, and it goes like this. It's not that long, so we should be able to go through it. Let us drink and be merry, dance, joke, and rejoice, with claret and sherry, thurbro and voice. The changeable world to our joy is unjust, all treasure uncertain, then down with your dust. In frolic dispose your pounds, shillings, and pence, for we shall be nothing 100 years hence. We'll kiss and be free with Nan, Betty, and Philly, have oysters and lobsters and maids by the belly. Fish dinners will make a last spring like a flea. Dame Venus, love's goddess, was born of the sea. With her and with Bacchus we'll tickle the sense, for we shall be past it 100 years hence. Your most beautiful bit that hath all eyes upon her, that her honesty sells for a hogo of honor, whose lightness and brightness doth shine in such splendor that none but the stars are thought fit to attend her. Though now she be pleasant and sweet to the sense, will be damnably mouldy 100 years hence. Then why should we turmoil in cares and in fears, turn all our tranquillity to sighs and to tears? Let's eat, drink, and play till the worms do corrupt us. 'Tis certain that post mortem nulla voluptas. Let's deal with our damsels, that we may from thence have broods to succeed us 100 years hence. And that is a very roistering poem. It's clearly meant to be sung. You can tell from the rhythm of the last two stanzas that it's meant to be sung. It's got a few bits and pieces in there. That Latin at the end there, post mortem nulla voluptas, means there's no enjoying yourself after death. There's no pleasure after death. A little tagline in there that was part of every schoolboy's education, so that Thomas Jordan thought they would know it. He assumed his readers would know that. And there's a little bit of colloquialism here. The anthology here gives Thomas Jordan's dates as 1612 to 1685, with 1612 maybe not so sure. And you have Thorbro, which is in there. It's a name, a particular kind of thing that you can enjoy. And also hogo, a hogo of honor, which is a little tint, a little spice, a tiny bit of something is a H-O-G-O. But I think the gist comes through despite the period talk, and the period talk is in part largely talk, because Thomas Jordan, he wasn't quite the roisterer that this poem makes out. He was a thoroughgoing theater nerd, is what we would call him today. He was 100% given over to the theater. He'd been in the theater since he was a boy. He was a boy actor. And he was so given over to the theater, so completely a part of that world. He wrote this poem, but this poem could often be used in the warm-up act for a theatrical production set to music. But he was so much a part of the theater that he stuck with the theater even when Cromwell came along and banned it. He still did it. He still kept putting on plays, kept writing plays, kept working in plays, even though he knew that it meant a prison sentence, maybe an indefinite prison sentence, maybe a severe beating or a public pillorying, something like that. He knew that, and he kept doing it anyway. He really didn't have much else to do. and was given wholesale over to it. I maintain he was notorious in his day for two reasons. He kept right doing theater until Cromwell finally got the heave-ho, and the Restoration brought back the theater, so he was right back to the theater. But he was mainly known in his own day for two things. One was the theater, and the other was that he had an awful free hand with other people's work. And I think he'd never get a biography nowadays, never any kind of a critical treatment nowadays, but I think the word, of course, has often been plagiarism, that he stole things from other writers. That's probably true, and he definitely knew what he was doing, and he knew that it was wrong. But there's a minor mitigating factor in that he grew up in the collaborative world of the Jacobin theater, and that he grew up in the world of the Stuarts. He grew up in other words, the long holdover from the late Elizabethan era and the Stuart world of the theater, where collaboration was everything, where nobody really owned anything. They just fiddled around with it and did things with it. Now, he took that way past that and just issued completely fraudulent editions of things with completely fraudulent attribution, or his own attribution or whatnot. But even so, I like to think always that there's an element of play behind that, in both senses of the word. But the main gist of this poem is that first line: "Let us drink and be merry, dance, joke, and rejoice, for we shall be nothing 100 years hence." Naturally, I love that sentiment. Naturally, I do. I think that human life would be a lot better. People would enjoy their one brief time here in the sun, one brief time where the chemicals that make you who you are have combined in the combination that makes you who you are. That's the only time it's ever going to happen. And it's happening now, and you have it now. And I've known a lot of fundamentalist Christians in my life who say, well, what a hopeless vision of existence that is, that you're alive and you're you, but it doesn't mean anything because someday it's going to be over. How depressing is that you're just a bag of chemicals? They always talk about that in the sense of, I want to live forever. I want my soul, all of my essence, which happens to be me now. It's certainly not me 10 years ago. And I'm certainly not saying that my soul is me in the extreme stages of delirium and incontinence in my 90s. That's not my soul. No, my soul just happens by wild coincidence to be me right now. I've known a lot of fundamentalist Christians who beat themselves up over that and say, no, I want my life only has meaning if it goes on forever. So obviously I have a soul, and obviously there's an afterlife. Who could stand such a bleak view of the universe otherwise? I always want to say to them, well, you don't seem to have that much problem with the billions of years that existed before you were born. You can't go back and change those. It doesn't even seem to bother you. The billions of years that are coming are the exact same. They're the exact same. They shouldn't bother you at all. It's just this little window that you get, this little window, to make the most of what you are, to make the most of how happy you can possibly be. And also the futile, but nevertheless completely human endeavor to be remembered past that little window. Just a bit. Just a tiny bit, even if it's just a tiny bit, to put your mark on the world in such a way that you are remembered at least a little. It's the personal or cultural counterbalance of the genetic drive to reproduce, right? On a fundamental level, your genes want to reproduce. Your genes want to live forever. And so there's the drive for you to reproduce, and then, as the final stanza says here, you're the offspring that you get off these pretty girls will be around 100 years hence. You won't be, but that will be. You'll continue in some way. I would argue that your odds are just as good by making a creative input on the world. Make an impression. Make something. Get good enough so that you make something that someone wants to remember. I'm willing to bet that this poet's entire genetic heritage has long since run out. Long since, especially since he wasn't much the roisterer that he claims and that he pretends to be in this poem. Well, let's just put it that way. I think his genetic line has long since run out, and yet centuries later, we can read his poem and remember him just a bit 100 years hence or 400 years hence. So there's a lesson to be had there about worry and about what to do with your time on earth. It comes from a weird, licentious place, but nevertheless, that is your poem for today. It doesn't have its convoluted Latin title anymore. That's probably for the best. It doesn't have a very good title in here. It's just called The Epicure, which is kind of boring. But that's your poem for today. We will meet again next time. Thank you, BookTube.